welcome to the episode of Jay Leno's Garage. The car we're featuring today, well, I guess it's kind of automotive royalty. This was one of the premier cars, certainly of the French coach building era, Talbot-Lago GSL. Talbot-Lago is one of those storied brands that goes back to just about the beginning of the automobile. It was Duroc early in the turn of the last century. It was Talbot Duroc, and then it got bought and sold. What brings us up to this point, a man named Antonio Lago, he was British and Italian. He took the company over in about the mid-30s sometime. You know, one of these go for broke all the time, never had any money, but built some brilliant cars, some brilliant Grand Prix cars, 6-cylinder engine, dual cam, not overhead cam, dual cam. I'll explain that in just a minute. And this was the swan song. He was broke, the company was broke by the time they built these. This was, I think it's safe to say, a pre-war type car built after the war. By that I mean the classic coach building, a lot of wood in the doors. And how I came to find this, I knew a gentleman, he was 98 years old, and he invited me down to look at his cars. And I saw this one. He thought I was kind of interested in it, and I politely said, you know, if you ever decide you do want to sell something, I'd be interested in this one. And he said, well, I need to come to your garage and see your stuff, you know, before I decide whether you should. All right, I get that. I'm the same way. You don't know somebody's going to take care of it. And he came here, and he was suitably impressed, so he let me buy it, and sadly, he passed away soon after that. He was all set to take this up to Pebble Beach. Now, it's interesting. He had fascinating cars. He had a Lamborghini Miura he bought new, 900 miles. He had a ATS, the same thing, 900 miles. Jaguar XK1, all the great cars of the 50s and 60s he owned, and he would drive them and park them. And he went to France to try and find one of the teardrop cars. He couldn't find one. He found this. He bought it in the early 60s. 1964, 1965, he had it flown from France to LAX. He went to the Department of Motor Vehicles, got a one-trip permit, drove it from LAX to his warehouse in Orange County, and parked it. And it sat there from 1965 until I pulled it out last year. To say it needed a fair amount of recommissioning, that's what they always say in auctions, you know, when a car is original, might need some slight recommissioning. Well, it just needed recommissioning. He drove it from LAX to his warehouse with a full tank of gas, and it sat for, whatever, 60 years just about with this full tank of gas and oil, everything. We got it here, put it up on the lift. Let me see the gas tank. And I said, it looks good, not a lot of rust. Boom, my hand went right through it, and then just tons of dirt and rust came out of it. Well, here's what the tank looked like. You see, we cut it open. You can see how rotted it was inside. We tried to use as much of the original metal as we could, the filler neck and some of the other pieces, but we had to fabricate a whole new tank. It looks exactly like the original, so you can't tell. The brakes were a nightmare because you have steel brake lines in this. And I had never seen brake fluid, what it looks like after sitting for 60 years, but literally turns to a gel. Luckily, we had a transmission flush type machine that heats up this liquid to its boiling and just keeps forcing it through. And we managed to clean out all the lines, but that took weeks to get all the lines clean. And of course, master cylinder had to be re-sleeved, and you're not going to find another one because this is a unique vehicle. But as you can see, we got it together. This is original paint, original interior. We have not touched that. We trued up the wheels. This is interesting. This is 1952, 1953. France did not have the technology to curve glass like they did at General Motors, so they made this out of plexiglass. They wanted to have curved glass. Carlos Deleuze designed this body. Another interesting gentleman, I tried to find a picture of this guy. It doesn't exist anywhere, but he was a very gifted designer. I think it's a beautiful car. It's just fascinating. It's a full-size automobile. It's got a front seat and a back seat. The T26 Grand Sports were the legendary ones. This is as I said, the company is going out of business by the 50s. He took one of the old Record chassis and shortened it. I think it's 110-inch wheelbase. This has 220 horsepower, has Webers on it now. This car was raced. Now it says competition here, but this, I know for a fact, this particular script is off of Delahaye. So somebody raced this car. The other unusual thing, it has a manual gearbox. These never came with manual gearboxes. They had what you call a Wilson pre-selector, which is exactly what it says. I think Auburn had one, and Accord had one rather. It's a thing where you put the lever, like you pull away in first gear with a clutch. Then as you're driving, you move the lever to second gear. Then when you want to change gears, like the Ferret tank we had a couple months ago, you hit the pedal and boom, it shifts automatically. And you pre-select each gear. It works quite well, but it was heavy. So it made it tough to race these because of the weight penalty. Somebody converted this to a manual transmission. I have contacted Peter Larson, the guru of these cars. And this car is a missing car. I think they only built 19 of these, something like that. This is the only one that is unaccounted for. He sent me an ad for a manual transmission. He sent me a picture of this car. This car was used by the French magazines to road test, some other facts like that. But other than that, it's sort of a lost car. So I assume somebody put a gearbox in it. It's not American. I think it's Port-a-Mousson. I hope I'm saying that right. That's the French gearbox that Chrysler used in the 50s. But it looks like a factory job. It doesn't look like a hot rod. Somebody raced this car because even the Weber carburetors that are on here, I think this conversion must have been done at the factory because all the dashboard knobs and the shift knob match. It's not like this has a big white ball or something on it for a shift knob. So that's unusual too. So somebody wanted one of these with a manual gearbox, which I must prefer. The Wilson pre-selector is interesting, but it's fun to be able to shift gears yourself. It's probably heavier than it needs to be. The Accord chassis was not light. This is not like the T26 chassis that was used in the pre-war cars. Those were a little shorter wheelbase and faster. Lago had to go with what he had, and I think he did a fine job. This is what you would call a grand touring car in the style of a DB5 or DB6. As I said, extremely fast for the time. You know, the XK 120 had 160 horse. This is 220. So, yeah, so there you go. So right there, that makes it pretty quick. And these were just crazy expensive. I'm not sure what the analogy would be, but whatever normal cars were, this was way more, put it that way, way more than Aston Martin or any of those cars because they were hand-built. I mean, the factory looked like something out of World War I or certainly pre-war. You know, by the 50s, everybody's getting modern machinery and coming back, and Lago had no money. He just had to go with what he had. The old guys, you know, boom, boom with the hammer and all that. The doors were a bit heavy, so they pulled on the hinges. We pulled the doors, and we, I see it's got the trick. We replaced all the wood in here. There's an awful lot of wood in this car. So that does make the car heavy as well. Let me show you the book I'm talking about here. This is the Talbot-Lago, The Car from Paris. That's the name of this book. Peter Larson and Ben Erickson. This is the ultimate book on these. You know, when you have a car like this, we only built 19 of them, it's not going to be a bestseller. And it's a real labor of love to do these kind of books. They're expensive to produce, but believe me, you don't get rich doing them. And I just want to thank him for doing it, and you know, and just being historians and saving history, because that's real important. You know, somebody's right now is writing the book on the mid-engine Corvette and all the cars that are for 100 years from now, people are going to want to know. And for the 19 of us that have these cars, this is the Bible. I'll show you some of the pieces, some of the things on this car once I open the hood. This, well, it's 2 volumes. One is the history, and the other is the cars. And there's detailed shots of the engine and how it all goes together and how it works, and sort of the story of Lago, who was a bit of a, I wouldn't say a flim-flam guy, but he could charm his way into things. See, what happened was he managed to get control of the Wilson Preselector transmission company, and he put it in every one of these that was built. Talbot-Lagos had the Wilson Preselector gearbox because he made money on each one. So somebody obviously changed this, and as I said, it looked like a factory job, but even he didn't know because there's just no history on this car. Let's open the hood up. I'll show you the engine. Now, remember, this is not a restored car. This is just a preserved car, so it's not as shiny as some of the other engine compartments. A 6-cylinder engine, 4.5 liter, which is huge by European standard. Well, it's pretty big here too. Good sized motor. Once the socialist government took over in France, that pretty much ruined the coach building industry, because the French, I've said this before, Germany was the birthplace of the automobile, but France was the nursery. France was where all the original ideas, System Panhard and all that kind of thing came from. After the war, the government decided, no, we're not going to build any fancy cars. Any engine more than 2.7 liter will be taxed literally out of off the planet. So consequently, these big engine monsters that were hand-built they just couldn't be sold at any sort of practical price. They were just taxed ridiculously high, and there weren't any customers for them, and that was the end of that. But this is the last of that era. This is the last stand for Talbot-Lago. And you can see all the pre-war stuff. Look at this, you have a crank here, this here. So you can hand crank the engine, not so much to start it, although I suppose you could, but mostly to set timing and whatnot. This looks like it's dual overhead cam. It is not. These are rockers under there. These are just valve covers. You have 2 cams down in the block. Let me show you the picture. Here's the pictures in the book. That will explain it to you. As I said, this book does a wonderful job of explaining how this engine works. It's similar to, I think the Riley in England used the same sort of deal. 2 camshafts low in the block, short push rods, Hemi head, which is pretty cool, with central plug position. So it's an impressive motor. I mean, by the 50s, the Italians were coming up with all sorts of interesting stuff, so he was soldiering on with his old-fashioned design, but very robust motor. You have an aluminum head on it. I've overheated this thing twice, once when a water pump, once when the crankshaft pulley broke, and I didn't realize it, and then the other day a fan belt. A fan belt broke the other day on this. And we were using the original fan belt, so I wanted to get ready for today's shoot. So let me take it around the block. So boom, out in the freeway. Okay, now I'm stuck. So I called George, our chief mechanic. George is great. He'd been working on the car. And then he said, wait a minute. I think there's a fan belt in the trunk. And we opened the trunk, and there it was, a brand new 1965 fan belt, still in the original wrapper, and it's on there now. I'm going to replace it this afternoon and get a better one. And you can see somebody has put all this writing in here in French. It's just what kind of oil to use, what weight, and whatnot. Look at these Webers. If anybody knows that model of Weber, let me know, because I don't know what it is. Somebody put these on. Normally this would have Solexes on it, 3 of them. But somebody put these Webers on to go racing with, and as I said, this car is really, really fast. Here's your plate right here with your engine numbers on it. Stock radiator. Obviously, we replaced the fan with this. It just happened to be red. I couldn't get one that was just standard gray, but everything else is exactly as. It's so funny, when we got this engine, it had been sitting, and we tested compression. It was 0. It was like, okay, we're going to tear this whole engine down. So we pulled the spark plugs, and we filled the cylinders with a combination of acetone and ATF, automatic transmission fluid, and let it sit for a week, 10 days, and it came back, 125 in every cylinder, which is not the end of the world, but it's good. And it's fine now. It was just parked. It wasn't pickled. Nobody put it away up on blocks, Obviously, we got new tires, but the originals held air. They're 18s, which are hard to find. What else is under here? We got a modern Optima battery that kind of gives it away. But everything is exactly as it should. I mean, it's a time capsule. You know, this car is so unusual. I believe it's the only GSL, the L stands for long, with the original bumpers, because these were just abandoned on the streets and sent to used car lots when they no longer had any value in the mid-60s, early 70s. So you can't even get bumpers. Yeah, even the ones at Pebble Beach don't have the bumpers on them. So I think this is the only original car. It might be the only one left with original paint, original interior, original bumpers, and still has, of course, the original engine. What else can I show you on here? I have fuse boxes up here. Come on, let's go around to the rear of the vehicle. Lots of aluminum and steel. Come on to the back. It's kind of cool the way the spare tire is. See, that fits in there. These straps hold the tire. Right here you have your gas cap is here, protects it. Then you have a piece of leather. It's supposed to go over there, but yeah, pretty good sized trunk, because the tire takes up the whole thing. That'll give you some idea. And the fan belt was under there, which is kind of cool. As I said, these bumpers, really hard to find. They just don't exist anymore. It's so funny to think that these cars are just literally thrown away, because in France, gasoline tax was so high, something like 4.5 liters, and this gets horrible gas mileage. I don't know what it is, but it's, I think it's the same as like a Chrysler Hemi. It's like probably 9 to 12, something like that. Just big motor, big pistons, and it's not like a modern engine, which is efficient, you know. Love the taillights, love the reflectors. I would love to hear from anybody who has information on this gearbox. If you've dealt with these things before, I'd like to know more. Come on, let's show you the interior now. And you see you've got these door handles, which are quite popular in the 50s. The Cunningham had this as well. We replaced all the wood inside here. Classic dashboard, original leather. I'm trying to bring this leather back using hide food. The cool thing is it's real leather. It's not like modern leather. You know, people use hide food on modern leather. It doesn't make any difference because it's all sealed, but this stuff really breathes, gives off this aromatic smell. You've got a cloth. Everything here is different. That's on, that's off, the exact opposite. You know, French switchgear can be very confusing, but let's do the, you have a clock, all Jaeger instruments, speedometer, you have your water temperature, you have ammeter, oil pressure, and and gas gauge over there. That's the one I had to rebuild. French, of course, there's an ashtray. Horns are up here. There you go. Classics. I've seen this steering wheel before. I think Delahaye had it as well. It's odd. Clutch is way over here on this side, but plenty of headroom. Beautiful car to drive. Handbrake here. Advance and return on the ignition, which is very unusual for a post-war car. Most cars were pretty much automatic advance and retard by that time. What else? What else? I don't know. Maybe it's time to take it next door, put it up on the lift, and show you what it's like underneath. These are notoriously cold-blooded. There's no chokes on these Webers. Right there she is up on the lift. As you saw, we utilized the old original tailpipe. We're trying to save as much metal as we could. As you see, Jimmy did a great job fabricating this gas tank. All the original, we used much original pieces as we could. This is original. He put all the folds in there as they should be. Yeah, he did a great job on that gas tank. See, all these are original pieces. We tried to save as much metal as we could. There's your rear end, and of course you've got leaf springs back here. Massive hydraulic drum brakes, as you can see on both wheels. Something not original, but original to the car when I got it, was this muffler here. Mitchell, this appears to be American, I don't know. It looks like we used to call it cherry bomb type muffler, or if it's a muffler at all, really. Here's the gearbox, okay? I don't know what this gearbox is. I think, as I said, Porte-Mousson. This looks like a factory installation to me. This does not look like it was done at some hot rod shop outside of Paris. I could be wrong, I don't know. I'm hoping maybe somebody much smarter than I in Talbot's could tell me this. I'm still learning on this car. We've only had it about a year, and most of that time was spent getting it running. George has done a wonderful job on the engine. We've managed to save as many pieces as we could. There are some numbers there. Maybe somebody can tell you something. You've got coils up front, independent suspension. I think these may have been the first pre-war cars to have independent front suspension. I'm not sure. Talbot, as I said, is an old company. Well, here's an example of old school. Look at those lever type shocks up there in front. And you see you've got the big scoops for cool the drums. As you can see, obviously new brake lines. You don't want to be that original. I mean, cleaning these brake lines took weeks of just soaking and cleaning, and oh my God, and then running literally boiling hot fluid through them to get them all back to original. But it would have been a Herculean task to pull the steel brake lines out from inside the body and refabricate them. But these are all original exhaust head, all original pipes here. I think this car was raced, but I don't think it was driven a whole lot. As you can see, it doesn't appear to have been in an accident or anything. All of this looks pretty good. The Recor chassis, see, drilled for lightness and shortened up a bit, and he was out of money. Not sure what that's doing on there. It's supposed to be on there. Okay. Fix that a bit later. Still got the original shocks, so. All right, let's take it for a ride and see how she goes. I know newer cars are faster and better made and more dependable, but there's something about these old girls I just find attractive. I just find the handmade quality of it. And obviously we've long passed the day when hands make something better than machines, but there's something about it I just find intriguing. Hearing those carburetors suck air that way. Such a torquey motor. I've had this engine got hot on me twice. As I said, one time we broke the keyway on the crankshaft damper, and harmonic balancer there, rather, and that just fell apart. So we had to make a new one of those. Got that going. And then, for whatever reason, we kept the 60-year-old fan belt on there, and that just
I was on the highway yesterday and blink, it just went into a million pieces. Then I started smelling oil coming through the floorboards. I go, what's that? I thought maybe it was a fire. It had just gotten so hot, the oil was beginning to turn into white smoke. I guess what I like about these kind of cars is they're still mechanical. Human hands made it, human hands can fix it. You know, you get a modern car like a hypercar or something, and a computer built it and a machine welded it, and that's pretty much it. You know, there's not much the human being can do. This is not a small car. It's probably about the size of a Mustang, I guess. With a back seat about as big as a Mustang. People always say, oh, is it hard driving on the right side? No, it's the same thing, really. Except you're shifting with the other hand, but other than that. Being one of the last coach-built cars to come out of France, it's kind of interesting when you look at, when you take the door apart and you see the kind of nails that they use, the kind of wood that they use. And, I mean, you had to be a carpenter to work on a car back in this day. But the fact that it survived this well, I mean, you know, I've got some books about the streets of Paris, you know, and I got it because it showed a lot of cool cars, you know, parked on the streets during World War II and in the 30s. And there's one or two of these, and they were just old cars. That's all they were. You know, nobody could afford to drive them because gas was so expensive. I do like the Wilson pre-selected gearbox, but I think it's kind of neat that this is one of the, well, so far it's the only known one with a manual gearbox. And I find it kind of fascinating that Peter Larson, the author of the book, was fascinated because this was an undiscovered car. Nobody knew where it went. You know, it was sold in '65 and never seen, never written about, never showed up at a car show. So there were no pictures, there were no anything. You know, if you want to go to Peter's website, here's his website up here. Check it out. He's got a couple of other car books coming out as well. You know, he does just these fabulous books on all the great coach builders, and just beautiful work. I highly recommend it. I hope to get him down here so I can take him for a ride in this thing and see what he thinks. It pulls really strong. You almost don't need a tack because you've got such torque in every gear. It's amazing how many brilliant engines were designed pre-World War II. You know, the BMW 328, which also went into Bristol, the 8-liter Bentley, the Duesenberg, this motor. We here in America tend to look down at the 6-cylinder engine as nothing but a poor relation to the V8 because V8s were cheap in America and popular. But in Europe, the 6-cylinder was like the V8 was here. It was quote the big block, you know. Cool horn. Yeah, this was a big, fast touring car, boy. The previous generation Grand Sport had more sporting pretensions than this one with the GSL. But still, they're so rare. To get anyone is a treat. It's an honor, actually. I'm honored that the elderly gentleman bought it from. I don't want to use his name. I didn't ask the family permission. I realized we're going to shoot this car today, so it kind of happened quickly. But it was funny. He came, he looked at my cars. He said, okay, all right, when I'm gone, you can buy one of my cars. I said, all right. I said, I don't want you to go. No matter what gear you're in, boy, it just pulls so nicely. When that engine comes on song, it just sounds fantastic. These 18-inch tires flat spot pretty easy. So you've got to drive for a good 10 miles before the rubber gets soft enough to back to being round again. I see why this car didn't have a radio. It's just, you just enjoy listening to the engine. That's a pretty fast car, even by modern standards. It just got so much torque. I think most people would think this was a V8 who were riding in it for the first time and didn't know. People describe Antonio Lago as a grease monkey and an engineer, and I think that's something he would have been proud of, actually. He really never had the finances to fund his projects properly, so the fact that he was able to build cars, win Grand Prix, sell luxury automobiles is a testament to just his skill and kind of charming people. I mean, you read the book and you realize, oh, some people didn't think a whole lot of him. But this is one of the great cars. If the government of France hadn't cracked down, it's interesting to see how big the French custom car industry could have gotten or could have remained. You know, I mean, they did such beautiful work. It just was not feasible from a tax standpoint to build anything there, because luxury cars were bourgeois and, you know, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. And they wanted to build smaller cars like little Renaults and the 2CV and all that kind of thing. So cars like this were just, they just weren't welcome in France. You know, the French government figured if you really wanted a car like this, boy, you were going to pay and pay and pay. And that's pretty much what happened. There just weren't enough people around to keep them going. It's a very dramatic car to drive. You feel everything, you sense everything. You smell the leather, even the wood. You know, when you find a car like this, you always have that decision: do you restore it, or do you just maintain it? And I chose to preserve this, maintain it, because the engine hasn't been out of it, at least not the last 60 years that I know of. And it's just the way it left the back. Same kind of paint, got some bolts, all that. You know, this is one of those cars. Either get it or you don't. It's just fun to save a piece of history, to preserve a piece of history. I mean, this going down the highway in 1952 at 100 miles an hour was a rocket ship. You know, just unbelievable. And it's still pretty quick by today's standards. But anyway, I want to thank Peter Larson for doing the book on this and getting me interested in it, and having all the facts and the knowledge there. You know, when guys do those kind of books, it just makes it easier to restore and find out exactly how they were supposed to be, as opposed to what people thought or what they imagined it was. So, Peter, thank you very much, and Mr. Erickson as well. And I'm going to go for a drive, and see you guys next week. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.